Today we're going to show you how to take your freshly purchased book match top and glue it up with excellence. Some of the problems I find with gluing up book match tops is that the tops are going to be typically no more than 1/4 inch thick unless you're doing a carved top, which may be about 3/4 of an inch, and in that case you can use standard clamps. But for something 1/4 inch or maybe even an 1/8 inch top that's sometimes used for drop top style construction, it needs to be stabilized in a different way than just your traditional big I-beam or pipe clamps. You need something that will be delicate with it but provide enough pressure for a good solid glue joint and help ensure that it stays flat. And I find most of the things that I've tried over the years has either been messy, so therefore it requires wax paper to be laid on top and underneath to pick up all of the glue residue that seeps out. I found them to be a little bit time consuming and complicated with little rigs that have a platform, and the platform you're supposed to put tape on, and then it's got these ropes that you wrap around it, and then these wedge shaped pieces of wood that you slide in to take up the slack of the rope and things like that. It's time consuming and it's a little bit awkward in the process of doing this. So years ago I came up with a solution, but the solution was basically using the top of my workbench and constructing a clamping system to hold it to the workbench, and then I would still use the wax paper. And so what I tried to do was come up with a better solution that solved all the problems that I've had or things that I felt like could be improved in the process of gluing up a guitar top. Because if you've got that really expensive piece of highly figured wood and you're going to make that perfect guitar top for your project, you can't afford to mess it up. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about a new jig that I've developed, and I'll be straight up front. I am going to list it on the website as a trial pre-sale, meaning if you order one at a special rate that I'll have for pre-sale, I will make it for you. But whether I keep it as a sale item long-term is yet to be determined. All right, so let's talk about the Maximum Guitar Works Guitar Top Glue Up Jig. First off, I decided to make it a dedicated jig as opposed to making some contraption on my workbench that I would then have to clear off my workbench in order to use, and then it had the potential of kind of messing up my workbench a little bit. Make a proprietary jig that was always ready to go, that I could hang on the wall, and when I need it, pull it off, lay it on the workbench or somewhere else, and glue up the top. The second thing is I made it adjustable so that you could use it efficiently for wide tops up to about 16 inches, a little bit over 16 inches. You could also use it on the tops that aren't perfectly square on the edges, and maybe kind of a live edge portion of the tree is tapering around the top, and it's adjustable enough where you could use it for that too. I used a melamine 3/4 inch substrate here, so number one, it would be flat and it would be stable, but also it provides a surface that glue will not stick to, so you don't have to lay the tape strip down. You can, but very easily when it's all done, you can just take a razor blade and you just scrape off that glue and it'll come off very easily. I made custom designed cams for tightening and providing the clamping action, and they work very effectively, but they're really simple in design and execution, but they're made with sliding T-nuts in the back to allow full adjustability, and they're recessed so that the board sits flat on the table. And they're so versatile that not only can I do the wide stuff, but with maybe a couple little strips in the center to provide buffers, I could do a head plate. If you're book matching a head plate, these will come in far enough with a little strips, and the strips kind of help diffuse the energy of the clamping pressure and allow you to clamp up those little tiny 2 millimeter, 2.5 millimeter thick head plates too. If you've done much resawing in order to make guitar tops out of billets, I think you'll agree it's not as easy as it sounds to do. It's a pretty specific process of the way it must be done, and the trick is, in order to get a book match where the grain matches and lines up as perfectly as possible, you have to remove as little material coming out of the slice as possible. If you think of it this way, grain is not moving only in a two-dimensional axis, it's moving in a three-dimensional axis. So therefore, if you take, let's say, a 1/4 inch slice, let's say you just run it across your table saw on edge and you take a 1/4 inch slice and then you sand it back a little bit more to make it flat, and you go to line that up, the grain will more than likely not line up perfectly because of the three-dimensional movement of the grain. So many of you know I've started selling some walnut tops because I've gotten a source of a pretty good supply of Claro Walnut, English walnut, and some walnut burl also. So what I'm doing is I'm preparing them in batches, and I'm using some of them for my guitars, and other ones I'm putting up available for sale. But let's talk about the process that we go through. So when I take a billet, and the billets are typically about 8 inches wide and maybe 2.5 inches thick and about 22 or so inches long. I take those billets, and first thing I do is I dimension them. I run the face across the jointer. I get one side dead flat. I take it to the table saw and I bring it down so that the other side is parallel. Then I take it back to the jointer and I make sure that both edges are cleaned up. So the thing about it is when I slice the boards and I lay them out, I kind of pick one side that I think is going to provide the best grain. But if I clean up both edges with the jointer of the billet before I slice it, here's the key word, before you slice it, then reality is that you could orient it this way or you could orient it this way because you have a clean cut on both of those edges. So once that's done, we've got to figure out and slice the dead center of this. In the past, I've showed techniques to resaw on the bandsaw and combine a thin curved table saw blade to make sure you get that saw started so that your bandsaw tracks straight and doesn't wander because it follows the path of least resistance. And that is certainly a valid method still to do it, but you are going to remove at least 1/16 of an inch, and then after sanding, you're probably going to be somewhere around removing maybe 80 thousandths. The more material that you remove, the less the book match is going to line up. So what I'm now using is a horizontal conveyor-fed bandsaw. And maybe at some time in the future I'll show you what that's all about, but the point I'm trying to get is that is designed for slicing as perfectly straight and consistently as possible. And the blade on that is about 2 inches wide and 38 thousandths thick, so it's removing very little material, as little as I know of how to do it. And then the sanding process, because it's such a consistent, smooth cut, only requires we remove about another 5 thousandths per side. So we're talking about less than 50 thousandths of material that we have to remove. Therefore, the book match is going to be as close as possible to being dead perfect. So I hope you understand that the premise of how the prep of the book match is very critical to determine how good the book match is going to be. Once I get all the tops sliced and cleaned up so they're ready to go, I'll actually use this all-natural stabilization solution that I'll wet these boards with. I'll roll it on all 6 sides, and then I'll sticker them and then wrap them to hold them in place and allow them to sit for a while on the shelves, maybe about a month, for that to fully penetrate and stabilize the wood. However, when I ship it, I bring them back together and I ship them tight so that as changes in temperature and humidity, as it's traveling in different areas, that the boards will continue to stabilize themselves. So what I recommend is if your area is much different from my area, which is an average of 20% humidity, and I keep them in a climate controlled area of approximately 65, 70 degrees, then I would plan to let them stabilize, or acclimate is a better word, to your area and give it as much time as you can, really. But if you can give it 3-4 weeks, I think that would be an ideal situation. So leave it wrapped during that time period. Now, in a perfect world, as soon as you unwrap the tops and you open it up, it's going to be perfect because of all of the work that I've done ahead of time and ready to glue up. However, this is wood we're talking about, and wood can change with different environmental conditions. So if you are, East Coast, West Coast, and you have a much higher humidity level than me, things can begin to kind of swell and things like that. So what you want to do is go back and re-clean up the center glue joint so that you get and ensure that you have a perfect fit. But what you don't want to do is take it back to the jointer, because you'll be removing too much material, and that may cause the book match to once again not be lined up perfectly. What I recommend is that you kiss the edges that are going to be glued up with a sanding device. Now, it's got to be flat, it's got to be straight, so it's a very critical operation. So when you have the top open and you're looking at the book match side, which will have like the serial number written on it, that's how you know that was the side that was always intended to be the top book match side. What you need to do is just to fold that in half. Now, if you watch one of my Stratocaster build series, I believe series or episode 7, and if you hung around long enough in that video, I talked about a technique on the jointer to ensure that you were going to have a tight glue joint, and that was jointing both sides together. All right. So what we can do with a sander is the exact same thing. I can fold these over, and I can butt them up against a straight edge, and then I can take a sanding device and run it along the side here. Now, they make tools specifically for this. This is almost like a shooting plane, except it's got a sanding strip on it. And so what you can do with that is take your book match that is tightly held together so that these sides are flush, and you can take that sanding beam and begin to work it fore and aft, just a handful of strokes, really. And when that is done, you can open it up and look, and just to make sure that no changes have happened due to the environmental conditions and caused any gaps or any slight waviness to those sides, and that it is still straight. You've removed whatever, a thousandth, a couple thousandths in order to ensure that's perfectly straight, and now it's ready for glue up. Now, if you don't happen to have one of these really cool Veritas sanding blocks, then what you could do is take a known straight edge, like a level is a common thing that's used, and put a 1-inch strip of tape on the edge of that level and lay it flat, and do the exact same process with the level. So now we're just working it back and forth using that known straight edge, and you want to double check to make sure it truly is straight, and work that back and forth to ensure that any minor imperfections due to the changes in humidity level, temperature, things like that are taken into account, and it's ready to glue up right now. Here's how the Maximum guitar top glue up jig works. Just put it on your workbench or anywhere that you have a space. Take your top and you're going to lay it out, and this is all going to be part of a dry fit, but you're going to lay it out, you're going to get it situated, and I try to line it up somewhere towards the center. It doesn't have to be perfectly in the center, but somewhere in the center, and I'll show you why in a second. And all we do is take the cams on the left side and bump them up against the edge, and then we just rotate the thumb knobs and we just lock that side down. Now I take the other side and I slide it against there with a decent amount of space left in the cam, and tighten it up lightly and then rotate. And when we rotate, it only takes that much. That was maybe about a 1/2 inch movement. When we rotate, the cam actually causes the screw to get a little bit tighter. So it won't have to rotate that far, and it provides the pressure that's going to be needed in here. All right, once we get that set up, then we're going to put the crossbar on top that goes down through threaded T-nuts of the jig itself, and this will hold the top from trying to bow up, which it really shouldn't do if you don't put too much pressure, and if you've got a good edge that's not angled, that's perfectly straight, and they come together, it will lay flat. But this will just ensure, especially the thinner tops, like the 1/8 inch drop tops, that it holds that down so that it glues up and dries flat. And then if it does that, it'll probably stay flat, although you'll want to keep it with weight on it if you're not going to use the glue up top for some period of time. All right, so that's what we do. Now, this top piece also has melamine on the bottom side, so I don't have to worry about any wax paper and the glue sticking to my jig, because it's not going to stick to this. So let's go ahead and glue it up. I'm going to take these back out of the way. And you only have to glue up one side of these. And I'm just using standard original Titebond. Titebond original as opposed to 2 or 3. There's purposes for 2 or 3. If I'm going to be heating these and bending these after the fact, I'm probably going to use Titebond 3. But Titebond, the original, is the hardest of the 3. So therefore, you don't want glue that is purposely designed to remain flexible, because that's going to throw off, you know, the rigidity that you want in all the joints in order to transfer vibrations, blah blah blah, you know. And so the original Titebond is better for this application unless you have specific reasons not to. So I'm going to create full coverage with the glue, but yet keep it to be somewhat translucent where you can just see the wood grain through it, and that will be the right amount. Our edges were already sanded with that straight edge to ensure that they're perfect. I am going to line them up right in here. I'm going to move my cams and again tighten them down with just a little bit of force, and then I'm going to rotate these knobs so it begins to apply pressure. And if you look at this, I am getting a good amount of squeeze out. Now I notice it shifted about a 32nd of an inch. I'm going to reduce my pressure real quick, and I'm just going to line that up, make sure that stays, and now I'm going to apply it again. Just enough to get that good squeeze out all along. Now again, so that I don't risk it popping up, I am going to lay my cross beam directly on top with the melamine surface underneath, and I'm going to tighten it down. It doesn't have to be cranked down again, just a nice snug tension to those knobs, and that will hold that piece flat. And now it's ready to sit for about 30 minutes minimum, but I generally let it sit for an hour or so, and then I let it rest overnight. That's how easy it is. That's how simple it is. I'm not tying up space on my workbench. And now I can relocate it, I can stand it up against the wall, and I can get back to doing other projects on my workbench. It's been about 40 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this out. You can just leave it in there for an extended period of time if you want, but I do find if you take it out of the jig within 30 to 60 minutes, that it will be a little easier to clean up the glue. And I like to use this guy, which is just your basic utility razor blade. This is, to me, one of the best scrapers that you can use, because It's sharp, it's flat, and when you get done, you don't have to clean it. You just throw it away. Now make sure you also get the glue off the melamine. But as you can see, one wipe there, and that's clean. And then we'll do the same thing here. Little bit of glue. Little bit of glue on the melamine. One swipe, and this is clean and ready for the next the next top that we do. And here, I might as well use my clamps to my advantage here, huh? Just hold that snug. For the grand finale, let's come in here tight and look at this top. Seriously, this is a grade 4 0.300 top. And look at the book match. Look how tight that seam is. Look how all the colors converge on almost an absolute precise position there. This is as good as it gets for a really cool natural wood looking book match guitar top. This is top 1031 C1 and it is available. And so if you're interested in it, just give me a holler, let me know. But this is an absolute beautiful Claro Walnut with natural figure and just wonderful color and streaking and stuff like that. And it'll make a beautiful guitar. Two-part here, show you how to do a book match top, show you my new jig. This is the Maxim Guitar Works guitar top glue-up jig. And this will be available on our website as of the time of this filming as a trial period to gauge the interest and whether we're going to continue to make it or not. At this point, it'll be available as a pre-order, which means it comes at a discounted price from what I anticipate the price will be if I go into full production. There'll be about probably a 2 to 3 week lead time if you place an order right away, but we are putting this on the website so that you can access it and order it, and that'll help me gauge the interest, and I'll certainly give you updated as to when these are going to be shipping out. So until next time, remember, no matter what you do, start with excellence.